stock market is way down.
It needed a correction.
Oh, so you support it?
Yes.
You bet.
Yep.
No one's upset over this?
No.
Nope.
No.
Nobody.
There's
There's not a
an end game
single
here, though.
40-year period in the history of the stock market where the stock market hasn't appreciated at an average rate of about 7%. It's so, yeah, there's ups and downs and corrections, and sometimes people are foolish and they jump out, buy high, sell low. But if people just get in and stay the course, they'll be just fine.
Yeah, and I was about to say, I'm not a day trader. I try not to look at it very often, which is, I think, a good thing. But I also trust that Trump and all of his advisors that are involved with the tariff issue know what they're doing. So I'm just going to hang on. I know it'll correct at some point. Yeah, I'm not really worried about it.
I think the
How
market's
much
going to
more
go
are
up
you
higher.
willing to pay for products and services that come out of China? How much do prices have to go up before you say, this is not that great
I'd
a
rather
strategy?
not buy from China. I'd rather pay more money and buy American.
Same.
And prices only go up if demand is inelastic and if there's no alternative supplies. And they're doing a brilliant job. They're surrounding China with countries that want to manufacture stuff as well. And we do need to bring the stuff back, the strategic stuff for sure. But China is going to be in the soup if they don't knock it off.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. So we got to talk about the mainstream liberal media taking a premature victory lap when it comes to this idea that the American people are turning on President Trump, right? That the American people are souring on President Trump's second term. Even though I personally do not believe that to be the case. And one of the reasons why I say this is because these polls from the mainstream liberal media tend to be fake, okay? In the sense that they definitely tend to underestimate President Trump's support. So for me personally, when I evaluate these liberal media polls, I always look at these polls as a measure of where the floor is, okay? Where the worst case scenario is for the president, not where he actually is, because a vast majority of the time, President Trump is outperforming whatever the liberal media polls say, right? He's doing much better on the issues than what the liberal media likes to admit, right? So again, keep that in mind. Remember, these are the same people that thought that Kamala Harris is going to win, right? They told us, according to their fake polls, that Kamala's going to win. Now they want us to believe that everything is so terrible, right? That the economy is in terrible shape, even though the economy was not good under Joe Biden, but they told us the exact opposite, right? They told us that inflation was transitory, that the border was closed, that crime is down. Again, they lied to us throughout all of Biden's administration. And now all of a sudden people want to believe the mainstream liberal media when it comes to the economy and what President Trump is doing, right? It's just extremely funny to me how all of these people who have admitted that, the media is fake, right? The media lies. Now, all of a sudden, when it comes to the economy, you see a little bit of stock market volatility and people now want to believe the media, right? As if the media is not still lying to the American people, okay? Because let's be honest, the only people buying into this narrative from the media are the NPCs, right? And the Democrats and the progressive, right? Because when you look at the actual polling, when you break down the polling, Trump supporters are not believing the narrative from the media.
His political base, MAGA Republicans in particular, are still very much behind him and are okay with this. They think the economy is getting better, even as Americans overall say that it's getting worse. The movement here has come from that segment of folks who kind of were giving him a chance on the economy, not necessarily MAGA voters, but they were saying, okay, they think he can lower prices and lower inflation. And so far, they haven't seen it.
It's always interesting to see how much people associate the prices they pay with the economy. When the president talks about trade, the president talks about deficits, right? And they're saying, it's my grocery cart.
Exactly. And that's been consistent, not just in this presidency, but back during Joe Biden's as well. It was, what's right in front of you? Right. What am I paying?
Immigration was a huge issue during the campaign.
So I find this to be extremely interesting, right? Like, notice how when they poll MAGA, right, actual Trump supporters, the educated folks, the folks that are actually paying attention, that aren't buying into the propaganda from the mainstream liberal media, that 70% of Trump supporters are saying, I think that we're better off, right? When it comes to the economy. And Trump supporters will be right if you actually look at the data, right? If you ignore the fear mongering about the tariffs, right? All the fear mongering about the mass inflation, the shortages on shelves, right? You remember when these people told us that if you mass deport the illegal immigrants, that we wouldn't have any food, right? You remember when they said that? Right? This is what they were saying, right? This is the narrative they were putting out there.
South Dakota dairy farmer Greg Mose supports Donald Trump and his pick of his governor, Kristi Noem, to lead the Department of Homeland Security.
Are you worried if there were a mass roundup of undocumented migrants that you might lose workers? You might not have enough workers.
How are they going to do that? Nobody will be filling the shelves. Nobody will be producing food. Within 2 days, we will not have food. There will not be food anywhere.
2 days?
Yes.
It sounds like you have a lot of faith that they're not going to do what they're saying.
That's pretty much what I'm thinking. So we have to trust in our officials that are put in place.
Yeah, so fast forward, President Trump did in fact execute on the mass deportations. They are happening right now. Okay, you have a lot of illegal immigrants leaving this country, right? The media has reported that these farms, these places that employ the illegal immigrants, right, to pick the crops, that, oh, well, they're having a hard time finding workers. Are there mass food shortages? Yeah, there was shortages of eggs, but that had everything to do with Joe Biden killing chickens when he was in office, right? It had nothing to do with Trump, which, you know, the media blamed on Trump. But anyways, again, have you seen mass food shortages as a result of the mass deportations? No, you haven't seen that, right? It's almost as if the media lied about what would happen, okay? And they basically said what they wanted to happen rather than what would actually happen. And people don't think that's what they're doing with the tariffs as well too, right? Like that's clearly what they're doing because the current data does not match the fear mongering, okay? For example, the latest CPI report showed inflation at the lowest that it's been in 4 years, right? Basically since Trump first left office back in 2021. Trueflation, if you don't believe the government data, right? Trueflation has inflation at 1.51%, right? But again, the lowest that it's been since President Trump left office, right? You also have the dollar index showing that the dollar is not collapsing. The dollar is actually stronger than it was at the beginning of Biden's administration, and it is stronger than it was throughout all of Obama's administration, right? In fact, the dollar gained strength after President Trump was elected, right? When President Trump was elected, we had a much stronger dollar. But did you hear the mainstream liberal media boo-hooing and crying about the dollar collapsing under Obama? No, we didn't hear much about that. We didn't hear much about that when Biden was printing trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars, okay, during the first half of his administration. No, we didn't hear about that, even though we had a weaker dollar than we have today. But all you hear about is how the dollar is going to collapse. Now, what did we hear about for the past few weeks when it came to the bond market, right? Oh, the bond market is about to collapse. People are losing faith in the U.S. dollar, in the treasuries. They're running away. We had a small spike in yields when Wall Street was bond dumping in protest of Trump, along with China. They probably were both bond dumping at the same time. But when you look at yields since President Trump has been in office, yields have gone down, which means the cost of borrowing has gone down, which means housing affordability is getting better because people don't have to pay as much in order to borrow money to buy a house, right? When you look at oil prices, the lowest that they've been in 2 years, which also brings down the cost of other things as well too that need, transportation, oil, energy, right? So again, tell me, how is it that we have inflation at the lowest that it's been in 4 years? We have interest rates going down. We have oil prices going down, the lowest that they've been in 2 to 3 years. Not extremely low, not too low, but, low enough to provide relief to the American people. But yeah, all we hear is a narrative that the economy is terrible. Trump is destroying the economy. I'm like, well, where is the data to back that up? All it is fear mongering over stuff that hasn't happened yet, right? That's what it is. It is a media-driven narrative.
Okay, and now I am joined by President Trump's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Thanks for joining us this morning, Mr. Secretary. We appreciate it. Let's start with the polls. For the very first time, the president's polling numbers on the economy are underwater, with 53% saying it has gotten worse under President Trump, with 72% of those in our poll saying it is very or somewhat likely that his economic policies will cause a recession. Your reaction?
Oh, well, Martha, I haven't seen the polls, and for the past 35 years, my business was analyzing data, so I think we've probably got to dig down in those. But what I do know is that Americans are behaving very different than what the surveys say. So the surveys may say that, but consumers are still spending. So I prefer to look at what Americans are doing rather than how they're answering pollsters.
And it doesn't worry you, the poll numbers that you have seen?
When I start seeing data to the contrary, then we can look at that. But again, these poll numbers, and also when I look at some of the things that are being published, there was a story 10 days ago that said this is the worst April for the stock market since the Great Depression. 10 days later, the NASDAQ is now up on the month of April. And I haven't seen a story that says, "Oh, stock market has biggest bounce back ever." So
it certainly has gone back and forth.
I think a lot of this is media driven.
Trump's strategy really has been to announce these tariffs, then dial some back, pause them, make exceptions. Explain why you see this as a good negotiating strategy.
Well, in game theory, it's called strategic uncertainty. So you're not going to tell the person on the other side of the negotiation where you're going to end up. And nobody's better at creating this leverage than President Trump. He's shown the high tariffs, and here's the stick. This is where the tariffs can go. And the carrot is come to us, take off your tariffs, take off your non-tariff trade barriers, stop manipulating your currency, stop subsidizing labor and capital, and then we can talk. But I tell you, Martha, that we've had several of these Asian countries that come in and said, "Oh, well, we'll stop doing this, this, and this." And I look at these lists and I think, how did we get here? How did we get here? Because this trading system has been so unfair. And as President Trump says, I don't blame the countries. I blame the previous administrations that let them get away with it.
But Mr. Secretary, look at what you just heard from Barton O'Brien there. The administration says it's worried about Main Street, not Wall Street. But you heard that small businessman saying his inventory in China might as well be lit on fire because already what has happened and the concern about what's happening next. How do they plan for things if they don't know what's going to happen?
Well, what they know is that the China tariffs are unsustainable because the Chinese cannot sustain this. That if the business people, like the gentleman you interviewed, stop ordering, China has no business model. Their business model is predicated on selling cheap, subsidized goods to the U.S. And if there is a sudden stop in that, they will have a sudden stop in the economy, so they will negotiate.
Which is why we're already starting to see China folding, okay, when it comes to exempting some goods from U.S. tariffs. Well, why are they doing that? It's because, like Scott Bessent said, the tariffs are unsustainable for China, right? Even if there are shortages, right, mass shortages, who does that hurt? If China can't sell it to us, then who they gonna sell it to? It's gonna hurt China. That's gonna put people out of business, right? See, here's the thing. If the mainstream liberal media actually explain to people what we're trying to do, and the fact is that this needs to be done for national security purposes to rebalance global trade for our own benefit, okay, for, again, a America first foreign policy, trade policy. If they actually were educating the American people on what was happening, I guarantee you that some of these so-called independents, right, who have been turned off by what's happening, I guarantee you wouldn't see these poll numbers, right? You wouldn't see these numbers. These numbers are a result of propaganda from the media. That's what it is. Because again, somebody's wrong. Either MAGA is delusional or the left, they are delusional, right? In the mainstream liberal media. For the last 4 years, the people who have been delusional have been the mainstream liberal media and the left, right? So I'm betting in this situation, MAGA is not delusional, okay? We're not delusional. It's these people that are delusional. So I'm just saying that, we're going to see what happens. They're now telling us that, hey, the worst of the tariffs, they haven't happened yet, even though we've been kicking and screaming and crying about it, right? But hey, just give it a few more weeks. You're going to see shortages, which I'm not saying that that's not going to happen. I'm just saying that this is what they're saying is going to happen. But understand that this is hurting China, right? This is something that, even if there's short-term pain, the whole point is to get China to the table. And once we get China to the table, at that point, we will have leverage to negotiate a new trade deal that's going to be good for this country. We will be negotiating other trade deals around the world as well, too, that will be good for U.S. producers and U.S. manufacturers. And when all of it comes together, then we're going to be in a much better place, right? But see, they don't want that to happen. They would rather Trump fail. They would rather Trump bend the knee to China, okay, than for the country to win in the long term. And that's what you're witnessing here, okay? They're asking really silly questions like, oh, when are you going to get the trade deals done? We need the trade deals done now. And it's like, you know how long it takes to negotiate trade deals? It takes months, years sometimes to negotiate trade deals. The fact that these people are asking and demanding trade deals get done in a few days means that they don't give a damn about what's actually being done or negotiated, right? They just care about President Trump folding to China, right? That's all they care about. That's all they want. They just want Trump to lose. That's what it's about. And that's what people need to understand, because if Trump accomplishes what he's trying to accomplish, if he reorganizes trade that is beneficial to us, the stock market is going to an all-time high, right? It's going to an all-time high. Okay, you're going to see capital inflows into this country that we've never seen before. U.S. producers are going to be more competitive in foreign markets, right? And this is not even counting the supply side stimulus from the GOP, right? We're not even counting that, okay? Once that happens as well, too, and if interest rates start to go down, oh, man, a year or two from now, the economy is going to be bumping, right? Going to be bumping. But they don't want that. They don't want that type of prosperity, right? That's not what they want. They rather see us fail, okay? The last thing they want is that scenario I just outlined, which could or could not happen. I don't know. I'm just saying that the media is trying their best to manufacture a reality where that doesn't happen. So without further ado, let's react to more Republicans setting the media straight.
And more from our new poll. We'll be right back. Approach the 100-day mark of President Trump's second term. Who better to break it down than our contributors, former DNC Chair Donna Brazile and former RNC Chair and Trump White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, former Chief of Staff, we should say. And Reince, I want to start with you. 100 days not looking so good for President Trump. Our new poll, which we've talked about extensively, President Trump has the lowest approval rating of any president at this point in office, going back to Harry Truman. People are worried about a recession. His polling is underwater on every single issue.
Well, I think it's important to know. I mean, this is a snapshot, and I think we're in the restructuring phase and the disruption phase of the Trump administration, meaning he promised all of these things. I mean, is there anything he's doing right now that he didn't promise, whether it be immigration, whether it be tariffs?
Well, I think probably back and forth on tariffs.
But there's some good news, too. Inflation is down, rates are down, gas prices are down. I think what you're going to see, and I think what was revealing in Scott Bessent's interview, is the next 100 days, which is the rebuilding 100 days, which is cutting deals on the tariffs, which is calming people down as far as where we're going in the economy, the tax cuts that are probably likely coming to the economy. I think the one thing you can say about President Trump is that he's doing exactly with what he said he was going to do. And a lot of politicians make promises, they don't keep them, and he's keeping every single one of them. But some people don't like some of the tariff talk, but
well, there's probably a reason for that.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing about the tariff talk, right? The media criticizes the president for not, quote unquote, having a plan on tariffs, right? And always kind of like moving the goalposts or whatever when it comes to the tariffs. Well, the reason why he has to do that is because it's an active negotiation, right? You do what you say you're going to do. You see how people react to it, and then you adjust, right? That's what's happening. It's nothing abnormal about this, right? You can't come out and tell the media everything that you're trying to do when you're openly trying to negotiate with the rest of the world, right? And that's what people got to understand. A lot of the stuff that is happening, yes, is on the fly, but it has to be because that's how negotiations work. Negotiations happen on the fly. Yes, you have a plan, but you have to also take into account that the plan may not go the way that you expect. So therefore, you have to pivot. And President Trump currently doesn't just have China working against him, but he has the mainstream liberal media, the Democrat Party, and Wall Street working against him at the same time. So yeah, you're going to have to make a lot of adjustments when you have four enemies that you're fighting at the same time. And that's what President Trump has to deal with. So a lot of this stuff for the media is premature. is nonsensical. Anybody coming into any solid conclusions about President Trump's economic policies just 3 to 4 months into his administration, when he hasn't even passed his signature piece of legislation yet, you're either dishonest or you're just not the brightest person, to be honest with you, okay? Because remember, under Biden's administration, he inherited a hot economy from President Trump, okay? And everybody was talking about how great the economy was until a year later, in June or July, that inflation started to peak, right? Then all of a sudden people were like, oh, this sucks. So again, that's basically the same thing they try to do here, right? They're trying to judge President Trump's economic policies and the effect of the policies without giving enough time to actually see what happens, right? To come to some solid conclusion about the effectiveness of his policies. Again, this is extremely premature.
It's going to come around.
But there was one promise that I believe he made to the American people. The reason why he had a larger, more diverse coalition that supported him in 2024, and that is he promised to lower prices. Groceries, Day one, gas, rent. That is a betrayal. He's crushing dreams and aspirations of people, small businesses, men and women who are still struggling to make ends meet. So
inflation is at the lowest that it's been in 4 years. You do not want deflation, right? That's the last thing that you want. You know how we get deflation, right? You know how we get prices to come down? A recession, which they also are fear-mongering about. Oh, Trump's going to cause a recession. But also, why has Trump not brought down prices? Prices haven't come down. Well, if you want prices to come down, then you can't fear-monger about a recession, right? You can't complain about a recession if you want prices to come down, because that's the only way prices are going to come down, if there is a recession or a depression, right? Otherwise, what you pay attention to is the growth rate of inflation. The growth rate of inflation is the lowest that it's been in 4 years, okay? That is what they're refusing to give President Trump credit for.
While the first 100 days may have been about the turbulence of coming back into power, the next 1,300 days, and I don't have the exact number, but they are so crucial to what the future will look like for the United States of America. We have allies who are worried about us. He's instilled fear, not because of retaliation, but people don't know where he stands tomorrow, which is why you have tourists making decisions not to come to the United States. So look, I want to hope for the best. I want to hope that this president learns something from his first term when the American people say no more, that's enough. But right now, the American people, through this poll, now they're not giving Democrats a lot of high marks.
No, they are not. No, they are not. 69% think the Democratic Party is not so great and out of touch with people.
And that's why many...
Exactly. And that's why... this little victory lap here for the media is so hilarious to me. It's like, well, Democrats, their approval ratings are lower, right? Like, come on now. Like, they are under the water when it comes to everything. Democrats are not doing great. They're not doing better than Trump. That's the bottom line, no matter how you square it.
Of us on our knees and got to continue to pray for the Democratic Party.
But that's because the Democrats are doing things that are highly unpopular, defending DEI, defending the IRS, defending this guy who is in El Salvador who's not an American citizen. Look, no one's dreams are being crushed in 2.5 months. Prices of gas are down. Inflation is down.
Facts.
Rates are down.
Facts.
You want to take the average of all groceries, you could make one argument that maybe that's up by 0.3 of a percentage point.
You're speaking of the last months of the Biden administration.
And as Scott Bessent said, the NASDAQ is up in April. Look, I did not sit here and say that when you do restructuring and disruption and you rebuild the federal bureaucracy, that there wasn't going to be a little pain. We've admitted that. But the question is, do you stand up for the working class or do you stand up for Wall Street?
You heard that business owner. You heard that business owner.
I did. I heard one business owner, and I feel bad for the guy.
We talked to more than one business owner, to be clear. I also want you to...
Yeah, but there are also other business owners that like the tariffs, right? That say, hey, this is beneficial towards us. Again, tell both sides of the story. Okay, they don't want to tell both sides of the story. They just want to tell one side, and that's it. Okay, but as you can see here, these people are very dishonest in regards to how they are currently judging President Trump and his economic policies. Again, nobody should be judging anything until we get his signature tax plan, right? I mean, the tariff stuff, that could end any day, right? That could end any day. But when it comes to the tax bill, that's going to be permanent. That's going to be permanent. And that's what people really should be judging. And that hasn't even been passed yet. So, to me, it's important to take a wait and see approach. Remember, these people were wrong about everything, especially when it came to the economy under Joe Biden. So there's no reason to believe them now, right? All of the people all of a sudden believing the mainstream liberal media, probably not a wise thing to do. These people have proven that they will lie about anything just to create a negative story about Trump. And I think that's what's happening here when it comes to the coverage of the economy. But we will see. We will see what happens. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.